Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Cantor Cohen is in France for a wedding, and so it's wonderful to have our cantorial soloist emeritus, Naomi Tausig, back with us tonight, all the way from the island. And we'll introduce him again later, but many of you were with us for dinner. Our scholar in residence this weekend, Joel Chasnoff, is here also, and he'll be giving the drosh tonight. But let's begin, page 142, Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bochem LeShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Barchuni LeShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem LeShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
As we welcome the Shabbat with the lighting of the Shabbos candles, we want to invite Marie Henry and Sandy Fairman to come up to help lead us in a reading on page 121 before the blessing of the candles.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us.
As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
Sandy Marie, you can go to the candles and take the center one and light the other two.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom. So, as is so often the case, the world intrudes, and Shabbos is hopefully this island of sanctuary and of sustenance in the midst of a raging world or a raging sea. And I think that's particularly the case this week. As we wrote about this afternoon, our thoughts and our prayers are on what's happening in Israel right now, and of course there's other things going on in the world as well. And here we are, and we'll talk about Israel tonight, and that's why Joel's with us this weekend. But as we welcome Shabbat, as we greet Shabbat through the singing of Lecha Dodi, we welcome the Sabbath bride. Let's imagine a visitor coming into our home, into our lives, that brings with it a fresh breeze, a new approach, like you have a visitor that comes to your home and it changes the whole conversation around the table. Something is added, not taken away. Something is elevated, not brought down. I hope that as we welcome the Sabbath bride tonight, as we greet Shabbat, that we feel that we have been added to, and that our blessings and our sense of shalom, of peace, are enriched, because I think we need that. I know that I need that most of all right now. Page 138, Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi, Dodi likrat kala, kala pene Shabbat nekabla Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad v'hishmianu el hamiuchad Adonai echad u'shmo echad l'shem multiferet v'letehila lecha dodi likrat kala Penei Shabbat nekabla Likrat Shabbat lechu v'necha Ki mekor ha-beracha Mirosh mikedem nesucha Sof maase b'machshava techila Lecha dodi likrat kala Penei Shabbat nekabla Mikdash melech ir melucha Kumitzehi mitoch hafecha Rav lach shevet be'emek habacha V'hu yachamol alaychem la Lecha dodi likrat kala Penei Shabbat nekabla Hitoreri kiva orech kumi ori uri shir daberi kavod Adonai alayich nigla lecha dodi likrat kala Penei Shabbat nekabla Boi v'shalom ateret bala Gam b'simcha uv'tala Toch emunei am segula Boi chala Lecha dodi Likrat kala Penei Shabbat nekabla
We'll remain standing, page 263, Chatzi Kaddish.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabba Ve'alma divrachute v'yamlich malchute B'chayechon v'yomechon Uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael Bagala Uvizman kariv Vehimeru Amen Yehishmei Rabba mevorach Le'olam olam me'almaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei Kedusha barichu Le'elam min kol bechata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata Damiram be'alma ve'imeru Amen Baruch hu et Adonai hamevorach
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam vaed.
You may be seated. We'll read together Ma'ariv Aravim on page 265. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro Ma'ariv Aravim b'chochma poteach she'arim uvitvuna mishana itim umachalif et hazmanim umesader et hakochavim b'mishmeroteim barakia kirtzono borei yom v'layla golel or mipnei choshech v'choshech mipnei or umavir yom umevi layla umavdil ben yom uvein layla Adonai tzvaot shemo el chai v'kayam tamid imloch aleinu leolam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv aravim.
Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael amcha Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta. Al ken Adonai Eloheinu, b'shokbeinu uvkumeinu, nasiach b'chukecha, v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, ובמצוותיך לעולם לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נהגה יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל, אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל, אדוני Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol avavcha v'chol nafshecha v'chol meodecha. Ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'divarta bam v'shivtecha b'beitecha u'v'lechtecha v'derech u'v'shofbecha u'kumecha u'kshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu l'totafot b'neinecha וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Amen.
So some of you know from Superstore Marat, who runs the kosher section at the Superstore. He's a great guy. And I was talking to him the other day, about a week or two ago, when they first put out the Pesach items in the Superstore. And he said, there's two types of customers I've decided. He said, which one are you? So what are you talking about? He said, they're the ones who see the Pesach items and they buy everything they can right away so they can get it. And there are those who say, I don't want to look at that. And I said, I'm the latter. I'm not ready. It was like just Purim had just ended. I was not ready to look at the Pesach items. But there is this preparation that, of course, we have to do to get ready. And some of it is, the cleaning and the, buying the matzah meal where you can find it. But it's more than that. It is the spiritual preparation that we do. And we do it all the time. It's part of our Judaism that we're always thinking about, being freed from Egypt. It's in our Kiddush. We're thinking about Micha Mocha every time we gather together. We're reminded of this moment. And yet, we have to take ourselves a little bit of a step out to place ourselves back in. That's what we do at the Seder. We place ourselves back in. So at this moment right now, in these just a couple of weeks, we'll be sitting around our Seder tables. It's important that we do it with that sense of intention, of readiness, of really being present in this moment. So maybe tonight as we sing Micha Mocha, we'll think about trying to really approach this moment of redemption with the right frame of mind, with being ready with all that we have. So let's join together on page 270.
Micha Mocha v'elim Adonai, Micha Mocha nedar b'kodesh, Nora tehilot osei felech, Nora tehilot osei felech, Malchutecha, Rahu Vanecha, Bokei Hayam Lifnei, Moshe uMiriam, Ze'elianu ve'amru, Adonai Yimloch, Adonai Yimloch, Le'olam va'ed. V'nemar, Kifad Adonai et Yaakov, Hogelo miad chazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael.
Amen.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom, leshalom. Ve'hamidenu shomreinu b'chayim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Amen. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom, leshalom. Ve'hamidenu shomreinu lechayim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Amen.
Let's read the English of Hashkivenu. It's so beautiful always, but I think as we think about prayers for our world and for Israel as well, I think it's especially moving. Give us a place to rest, O God. Shelter us in the long, soft evening shadows of your truth. You are true protection and safety. In your presence we find love and acceptance. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace, over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours. Baruch atah Adonai haporeh sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. Amen.
Amen.
Page 272.
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, ביני ובין בני ישראל, ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. Yam bada bim bam bye, Shabbat Shabbat, yam bada bim bam bye, Shabbat Shabbat, yam bada bim bam bye, Shabbat 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 Shalom. Yisheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz uvayom Hashvi Shabbat vayinafat. Yam bada bim bam bye, Shabbat Shabbat, yam bada bim bam bye, Shabbat Shabbat, yam bada bim bam bye, Shabbat 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 Shalom.
We'll rise together now for the Amidah, beginning on page 274.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanorah, El Elyon, Gomel chasadim tovim v'konei hakol, v'zocher chatzei avot v'imahot, u'mevii geula livnei b'neihem, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה.
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, לחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ברופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומדומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה. ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יעללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Amen. You are holy, your name is holy, and those who are holy praise you every day. Blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh.
Amen.
You may be seated. We'll continue on page 277 in that lower paragraph, the third line, Kadshenu b'mitzvotecha.
Kadshenu b'mitzvotecha, v'tein chelkeinu b'toratecha. Kadshenu b'mitzvotecha, v'tein chelkeinu b'toratecha. Hai, hai, hai. Sabeinu mituvecha, v'samechenu b'shuatecha. Sabeinu mituvecha, v'samechenu b'shuatecha. Hai, hai, hai. Yai, dai, dai, yai, dai, yai, dai, dai, yai, dai, dai, yai, dai, 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 yai, dai, yai, dai, 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 yai, dai, 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 yai, dai, yai, dai, dai, yai, dai, 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 yai, dai, 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 yai, dai, 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 dai.
Page 279, Ritzeh.
Ritzeh Adonai Eloheinu be'am Yisrael u'tefilatam be'ahava tekabel u'tehi l'ratzon Tamid avodat Yisrael. Yisrael Amlecha. El karov lechol korach v'nei el avadecha v'choneinu. Shefach ruchacha Aleinu v'techazen eineinu v'shuvcha l'Tzion b'rachamim Baruch atah Adonai HaMachazir Shechinato LeTzion LeTzion LeTzion.
So on Monday, I got my all-the-time glasses. I used to just have driving glasses, and now I'm the age where I need all-the-time glasses. And, you know, it's like these aging things. Sometimes they're a little hard to swallow, but it's also an amazing thing, right? That we have the ability not to just completely let our eyesight deteriorate, but actually to have lenses to continue to see the world. And so much of our lives is really about that kind of perspective of gratitude, that any situation we can kvetch about or we can see a positive spin. And it's okay to kvetch a little. We're Jewish, that's what we do. But the world around us has so many different opportunities that we can experience it with gratitude or with a sense of angst. And when we have those moments for gratitude, we have to hold on to them. It's so, so critical. And so we have that opportunity whenever we come to this prayer of hoda'ah, of thanksgiving, and so we will do that now. So think about all of those blessings for which we can look at the world with a sense of thanksgiving. We'll join together the middle of page 281, Ve'al Kulam.
Ve'al kulam, ve'al kulam, Yitbarach v'yitromam, Yitbarach v'yitromam, Shimcha Malkeinu, Tamid le'olam va'ed, Ve'al kulam, Ve'al kulam, Yitbarach v'yitromam, Yitbarach v'yitromam, Shimcha Malkeinu, Tamid le'olam va'ed. V'cholchem yodu chasala, v'halalu et shimcha b'emet, Ha'el Yeshutenu v'ezratenu Selah, Baruch atah Adonai, Hatov Shimcha, Hatov Shimcha, Ulecha, Ulecha na'eh lehodot.
Page 282, Shalom Rav.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Hamcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Hamcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon lecho hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon Lecho hashalom, Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim leolam. V'tov b'necha levarech et Amcha Yisrael, Bechol עת ובכל שעה, בשלומך. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. Baruch atah Adonai, hamavarech et amo Yisrael, b'shalom.
Amen. Take a few moments now for our own silent prayer.
Amen, 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 amen. Amen, amen.
I invite everyone to turn ahead to page 371 for our Mishaberach for healing. So we take a few moments now to bring our prayers together as one on behalf of all of those we are thinking of who are struggling with health, with need of healing of body and of soul. In particular, the Shabbat, we pray for Jerry Lampert, Sam Brown, Louise Adrian Seelig, Susan Mishler, Lynn Wolfson, Rabbi Lindsay Bat Joseph, Natalie Romelli, Yumkin Goden, Tzemach ben Menashe Halevi Verikla, Meir Tzvi, Meir Zalman ben Rachel, Daniel Gottesman, Bill Shaw, Claire Columbia, Matt Good, Alicia Eckersley, Carla Zivet, Janet Gelb, David Shlomo Gorney, and Andrea Jarzbiak. I invite you, if there are other people you're thinking of, if you would care to stand and share their names in the community.
Beryl Mordechai ben David Miriam Chaviva bat Abraham Sarah Sandy Bone.
Join together in the Mishaberach, the middle of 371.
Mishaberach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach imotenu mekor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Shabbat Shalom. It's nice to sometimes just be able to sit in the sanctuary and be a Jew in the pew and watch all of you and join you in prayer, and it's a beautiful thing. I want to first acknowledge and thank David and Rhonda Sachs, who have sponsored our Oneg this evening in memory of David's mother, Lila Sachs, of blessed memory. And so we thank them for that. And to draw your attention to our announcement sheet, there's a number of things going on, as you know, at the synagogue. We are in the midst, and I'll talk about him in just a moment, of our Scholar in Residence weekend with Joel Chasnoff, who was here, and we had dinner together this evening with a number of us and did some learning about Israel, and Joel's going to deliver the drash in just a moment. Tomorrow morning services are at 10 a.m., Torah study at 8:30, and Joel will be part of our service tomorrow morning, and then our Kiddush lunch afterwards. We'll continue the conversation and the discussion. And then tomorrow night at 6 o'clock p.m., we have our first single mingle. So if you're 40 and single, please, or over 40 and single, you can be 40 or you can be over 40. You could probably come if you're 39 too. If you'll join us here tomorrow night at 6 o'clock before our evening with Joel, we've got hors d'oeuvres and beverages and a bit of a mixer activity. I want to thank Sandy for helping to be part of the committee for putting that together. So please come out for that. And then at 7:30 is our evening with Joel, Living in the Land of Milk and Funny. And Joel will be doing his stand-up comedy routine right here in our sanctuary. It will be funnier, I promise, than anything that I have done anytime recently. Our men's club has things going on Wednesday, Cold War with China, nothing funny about that, with Professor Paul Evans at 7 o'clock. Queer Torah study with Cantor Cohen, who will be back from France by then, is at 7:30 that evening as well. And we also have it's a busy night, Wednesday night. We also have our grade 8, 9, 10 teen Kala program parent session on a Jewish view of love, sex, and relationships, which is in preparation for a one-day seminar that we're doing with our grade 8 and 9 students on that topic. But it's open to all parents, whether you have teenagers or younger, or you're tweens, or still trying to figure out what to say to your college-age students. So that's at 7:30 on Wednesday night. I'm getting a lot of laughs over there. Thank you. I'll tell you, you do this, I'll do that. So that's at 7:30, and that's with Carly McPhee and myself. She's a certified sex educator that has done this work in our schools, in the Vancouver school system for a long time. There's lots more going on, including getting ready for Seder. Women's Seder is on April 1st. There's a walking group on April 2nd. There's Craft Your Own Seder on April. You can read all of this. The second night Seder is here at the synagogue on April 6th. There's 2 Sederim. The early Seder is for families, young families with children. The second Seder is for adults. Again, all of this information is on our website. I don't know why I'm reading it all to you. But if you don't have a place for Seder, please contact our office and we will try to find one for you so that we can match you up. Before I introduce Joel, or maybe as an introduction to him, I just want to comment on something that Rabbi Brown mentioned about her glasses. And we've been kind of talking about them all week because I've had glasses since I was 15 or 16. Well, we were talking about that earlier. So whenever you get glasses, sometimes people will say, well, you look different. And I think that that's not a question as much as it is a statement. Because with our new glasses, our new lenses, we might see things differently. Certainly things are in a different focus, hopefully a better focus than they were. There's a teaching in our tradition that each generation stands upon the shoulders of the generation before them. And the beauty of that teaching is not so much that generation serves as a foundation, although of course they are, but it's that the new perspective that you gain, if you can imagine it, of standing upon the shoulders of another, that you can see just a little bit further from just a slightly different angle. And whether that's a better angle or a worse angle, you see from a different angle than those that came before you. The reason we do weekends like we're doing, and the reasons why we have the programs that we have, and particularly about Israel, is so that we can see the world through a new set of lenses, a new set of glasses. The goal here is to have a new perspective and incorporate that into your own. So I hope tonight and throughout the weekend, as Joel brings to us not only the politics of Israel, which we talk about a lot, but the culture of Israel, the underlying ethos of the people, the ta'am, the flavor of the country, that you can add that to your perspective, to your lenses, and see Israel just a little differently, maybe a little clearer, at the very least from a different perspective. It is truly a pleasure to have Joel Chasnoff back in our Vancouver Jewish community, though the first time here at Temple Sholom. Joel was here recently for the Chutzpah Festival. Everywhere Joel goes, and around my colleagues, they've always said, you've got to bring him in, you've got to bring him in. And then here it was that it presented itself. Joel actually reached out to us. I'm going to kind of be in the neighborhood in Tacoma, and it just worked out so well. Joel, we're thrilled that you're here with us this weekend. We're truly honored, and we welcome you to our Bima.
So first of all, Rabbi Dan, you're actually really funny. And I'm giving the Dvar Torah. So we're reversing roles here. Thank you so much for coming, for joining us tonight for Shabbat services. I'm really honored to be here. And I loved your idea of standing on the shoulders of those who came before you and giving you a new perspective. And I just want to, for the first time, I've heard that expression so many times, but only now did I get another thought about that when you stand on the shoulders of someone, if you've ever put a kid on your shoulders, it's actually not easy. You need to steady yourself and find your balance. And I think that relates very much to what's in Israel right now going on, is that Israelis are standing on the shoulders of those who came before them, but they're also having a hard time finding their balance. We cannot forget, this is the first time in the history of the Jewish people that we have been in charge of ourselves. And the same way when a kid might go off to university and they might do some wild things and go through some growing pains because they're finally in charge, I think in many ways that's what Israel is doing. It's the first time that we've had this sort of self-determination. We're not going to get it right immediately. So I think we're trying to find our balance as we stand on the shoulders of those giants who came before us. So why am I here? Why do I have the right to introduce myself to you and talk a little bit about my perspective on Israel? I live in Israel now. I grew up in Chicago. I'm a comedian, but I also write books. And this one is my fourth book. I introduced it a little bit before at the dinner, but I'll reintroduce it here. It's called Israel 201. The idea being that this isn't the 101. It's not your introduction to Israel about the things we usually hear about, who won which war and cherry tomato hasbara. I don't know if you're familiar with that concept, but it's the idea of like, we gave you the cherry tomato, so don't criticize us about anything we might not be doing right? It's not that. This is 201. I wanted to write a book that gave readers a deeper look at what it's really like to be in Israel, but also Israeliness. What's it really like to be Israeli? So here's some examples of what this book is about. It's about cats. How many of you have been to Israel? Did you notice how many cats there are? Right. So one of our chapters is dedicated to the cat conundrum. Why are there so many cats in Israel? Why is it that Jerusalem has one of the highest concentration of stray cats of any city in the world? There are more than 5,000 stray cats per square mile in Jerusalem. That's over 150,000 stray cats in Jerusalem. Why is that? Why is it actually a Jewish problem? Believe it or not, there is a Jewish twist to the cat conundrum. It's because we Jews in the Torah have a concept called tsa'ar ba'alei chaim, the concept of causing trouble, harming animals. We do not want to do that. And so that means that we cannot solve our cat problem the way other countries have solved theirs. This book is about LGBTQ and the IDF. In the early 1990s, Israel changed its policy on serving openly as a gay or lesbian soldier. And I wanted to find out what's it really like on the ground. So I interviewed 4 openly gay and lesbian combat soldiers about what's it like to be out in the Israeli army. And I also spoke to a professor at Bar Ilan University who did a study. And he studied what happens in a combat platoon of males in the IDF when they suspect that one of their colleagues, one of their fellow soldiers, is gay. Whether they know it or not, they suspect it. And he found that there's no change in the morale of the platoon when that happens. And the Pentagon in the United States found out about this study. And they said, well, that means we should change our laws as well and allow soldiers to serve openly. And he said, no, I don't recommend that. In the U.S., there's not a bond between the people the way there is in Israel. In Israel, people are used to mixing with others, and they learn because of the army to tolerate other cultures and peoples in a way that Americans don't. So we don't think that that would necessarily work in the U.S. And lo and behold, they did delay their opening up of the military. This book is also about the Israeli personality. I firmly believe that you cannot know Israel unless you know the Israeli personality. I am married to a Yemenite Persian Israeli for 25 years almost. I'm counting the days. And it's very different. Those of you who know Israelis know that they do not think like us. They will speak their minds. You will never be with an Israeli and say to yourself, I wish I knew what she really felt about me, right? I wish she'd stop being so nice and diplomatic. No. Israelis speak their mind. It's very hard for someone like me from the Midwest in the United States, where we apologize for everything, to be in a country where people are so outspoken and don't necessarily apologize. But Israeliness colors every aspect of Israeli life. And I want to explore some of the biggest Israeli character traits. Dugriut, which means speaking your mind, not holding things in. You can be with an Israeli for 5 minutes and he or she will tell you their salary. They will. In America, like I never ask people how much they earn, but in Israel, dugriut, they will speak about that. There's an idea called kehilatiyut, which is community. Israelis, at the end of the day, really will take the shirt off their back for you. There is a bond between the people that I ultimately think is what is going to save Israel right now, if we can just remember that bond between us. So that's another aspect of what this book is about. And the whole idea of the book is to show people the broad spectrum of Israel, the magic and the mystery of this wonderful country, but also the chaos. I wanted to be really honest when exploring this book. I did not want it to be another Disneyland sanitized version of Israel. I wanted to show the problems as well. So I interviewed Susan Weiss, the director of the Center for Women's Justice, about marriage and divorce laws in Israel. As she said, in Israel, a woman can fly an F-16 in the Air Force. She can be the CEO of a high-tech country, and she can be prime minister. But what she can't do is file for divorce. So she explained to me how she and her colleagues are petitioning. I said, oh, you're petitioning the Knesset, right? She said, no, we never go to the Knesset, because Knesset members change with the wind. They'll do whatever they need to stay in power. We go only to the Supreme Court, because it is because of the Supreme Court that precedents will be set and our rights will be protected. And that's another reason why everything going on in Israel right now is it's a woman's issue as well. It's not just Judaism in general. I spoke to, it's really important to me that 20% of Israel's population is not Jewish. It's actually a little over 20%. It was important for me to get that perspective as well. So I actually spent a day at the #1 high school in Israel. Anyone know what the #1 high school in Israel is? I didn't know either until I started researching it. It's the Darka Druze High School in the Galilee, in a town called Yarka, a Druze town. So I went up to this high school. They've been the top high school in Israel for 10 years in a row, and I wanted to find out how they become such a great school, and what's it like to be Druze in a country run by Jews. It turned out this actually used to be one of the lowest performing high schools in the country. But then they got a new principal called Kamil Shela. He's a Druze educator, and he turned the school around, and one of his keys was using the Druze concept of honoring your family. It's very big, he told me, in the Druze community, to bring honor to your parents and those who came before you, especially because they really believe in reincarnation. So when he interviews students, he brings the parents in as well. And he says to them in their interview, are you prepared to bring honor to these parents sitting next to you if I accept you into the school? And that's one of the keys. And other educators in Israel are now starting to use some of the principles he laid out. So I really want to give people the whole broad spectrum of Israel. The good stuff, the bad, and the premise is the more you know, the more connected you'll feel with the country. And one of the great things about writing this book is you learn all the little stories that make Israel what it is. And one of my favorite stories, I think it's one of the most seminal moments in Israel's history. It happened on November 16th of 2018. Does anyone know what incident this is? Again, I didn't either until I researched it, but it's really a great story. On November 16th of 2018, an El Al flight from New York City to Tel Aviv made an emergency landing in Athens, Greece. And it wasn't because there was an ill passenger on board, and it wasn't terrorism, and it wasn't a mechanical issue. Anyone know why? It was Shabbat. There had been a snowstorm in New York. The plane took off late. Friday afternoon, the pilots realized they would not land in Tel Aviv on time. And so the plane made an emergency landing in Athens, Greece, so that the passengers would not have to break Shabbat by being on the plane. And let's just move back for a second and realize that Herzl, when he had a dream, Im tirtzu ein zo agada, if you will it, it is no dream. Is this what he imagined, a Shomer Shabbos airline? In the 1940s, when 1/3 of our population was wiped off of the earth, 1/3, if you could tell the Jews in Majdanek or Auschwitz that in 80 years there would be an airline where the pilots were Jewish, and where the flight attendants made their announcements in Hebrew, and these planes would not fly on the Sabbath, would they have believed you? They probably would have thought you were out of your mind. So we need to pan back and realize how miraculous things are. Now, passengers on this plane, they were actually in two groups. Many of the passengers were really glad that this plane landed in Athens because they were religious and they wouldn't be forced to break Shabbat. But there was another group who was very, very upset. These were Israelis who had families to go back home to, kids waiting for them at home, business meetings to be at on Sunday morning. And now the fact that their plans would be delayed because the airline is Shomer Shabbos, they were very upset about that. And it really raised the question in Israeli society when this happened. What is El Al? Is it an airline for Jewish people, or is it a Jewish airline? And let's look at what each of those would mean. Like an airline for Jewish people, in my mind, that would be an airline where you could probably get kosher food easily. You wouldn't have to go through a whole rigmarole. You could tell the stewardess, I want kosher food, you'd get it. That's an airline for Jewish people. If you wanted to pray shacharit in the morning, you could probably find a minyan in the back of the plane. You could put on your tefillin. No one would think you were actually strapping on a bomb. You'd be, this has happened. You'd be allowed to pray. This would be an airline for Jewish people. Now, what's a Jewish airline? That would be an airline probably where you can only get kosher food and where you cannot fly on Shabbat and where they can actually move your seat. If a religious Jew sitting somewhere else says, I don't want to sit next to a man or a woman, and so they would rearrange the seating. I actually had a friend who hates to fly El Al, but he had to, so he bought 2 tickets so that he could have the seat next to him open. And the flight attendant seated a religious Jew next to him because this man said he couldn't sit next to the woman where he was seated. And my friend said, but I bought 2 tickets. And she said, oh, you have 2 seats. It's just your other one is way back there. Why do I love this story about El Al? Well, I think because obviously it's a metaphor for Israel in general. We do not know, is Israel a Jewish country or is it a country for Jews? And in many ways, this is the question that Israel is asking ourselves right now. In the final chapter of this book, which is one of my favorite chapters, I interview a futurist named David Pasig. And when I say futurist, that's exactly what it sounds like. The way historians study the past, he looks at economic trends, he studies religious movements, social trends, and he's able to predict the future. And that might sound bogus, but this guy actually knows what he's doing. In the late 90s, Pasig predicted that within 10 years, there would be a major terrorist attack carried out by Islamist fundamentalists on a symbol of Western capitalism. And lo and behold, September 11, 2001, the Twin Towers, that happened in New York. He predicted the 2008 financial crash, and he said that by the year 2020, human beings will be able to interact with their refrigerators, their appliances, and their cars. And people thought he was out of his mind. And lo and behold, that is the world we are living in. And I tell you that to show you this guy knows what he's talking about. And David Pasig says that at this moment, the biggest problem Israel has is that the country doesn't know its ethos. He says for any country to survive in the long term, it has to have an ethos, a mission statement. In America, where I'm from, the United States, the ethos is individual liberty. That at the end of the day, everyone, every principle, every institution comes down to the idea of individual freedom, the right of the individual. He said that Israel still does not have its ethos. He also said this is to be expected, that most countries for the first 3, 4, 5 generations, their ethos is survive. Their main objective is just to keep this country going. And all the more so for Israel in the ashes of the Holocaust, surrounded by enemies. Israel's main purpose was to survive for the first 3, 4 generations, 5 generations. But he says, once a country can survive that long, then the question becomes, well, can we actually thrive? And if we are going to thrive, then who are we? And what kind of country do we actually want to be in that we're distinguished from other countries in the world? And he says, once this conversation begins, often there's a civil war. And in retrospect, you can always know when the civil war began because a leader is assassinated. And we saw this in November of 1995 when Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated, not by an outsider, a non-Jew. He was assassinated by a religious Jew. And in many ways, Pasig believes that this is when Israel's civil war, if you want to say that, began. And he's He also cautions that civil war isn't the way we might picture it, with guns and a line and gray coats and blue coats like we had in the United States in the late 1800s. Civil war, it's small groups of the population blaming other groups for the country's problems. But that is what, in his mind, a civil war is. Now, this week's Torah portion, Vayikra, is one of the most, in many ways, boring, mundane, and unrelatable in the entire Torah. It's about animal sacrifices, something that couldn't seem more distant from the lives we live today. I myself am vegetarian. I have many friends who are vegan. The idea of sacrificing animals just isn't even, so to speak, on the plate. And yet, I think there's something really important about this Torah portion. The Hebrew word, I love Hebrew, and I have this, I think Rabbi Dan is on it. I send a newsletter out every week called Hebrew is Magic, where I take Hebrew words and I dissect them and I look for the life lessons embedded in the Hebrew words. And the Hebrew word for sacrifice is korban. And when we think of korban, what's the first thing we think about? Sacrifice. We think about giving something up, that by giving up something of ourselves, we're achieving a certain goal. But what is the shoresh of the word korban? The root. Every Hebrew word has a root upon which that word is founded. And the root of the word korban, kuf resh bet nun, is the three letters kuf reit bet, karav, which means karov, which means close to. Lehit karev means to get close to someone. Karov is an adjective that means nearby. And the point of a sacrifice, the lesson here is that the point of a sacrifice is not to give something up. It's to become closer to someone or something or an entity. And there's a lot of talk right now in Israel about the sacrifices people need to make in order to make Israel function and last. And I think the idea that people are losing sight of is that these sacrifices cannot be about what we give up. They have to be about what will ultimately bring us together. Lehit karev echad lesheni, to get closer one to the other. You know, the Hebrew word for society is chevra. And it's interesting to look at the shoresh of that word too. The shoresh of the word chevra is chaver, chet bet resh. And you might say, oh, I know the word chaver. It means friend. But the true meaning of chet bet resh is not friend. It's bond. If you look at the word machberet, which means notebook, it's the same shoresh, chet bet resh. But what is a notebook? It's papers that are bound together. Tachbura, which is transportation, it's the same shoresh. And why is it called that? It's because transportation is a way to bond different locations together. So when we talk about society, you know, we can easily say society is about friendship and love for your fellow neighbor. I think the Hebrew word chevra, society, actually means a bond. You don't have to love your fellow neighbor, but you cannot forget that you are bound up with your fellow neighbor in the same story. You are part of the same narrative. Now, David Pasig, this futurist, I want to point out that he is extremely optimistic about the future of Israel. He told me if Israel were a stock, buy and hold long. And the problem, he said, is that we are trapped in the moment we're in. He said in the Renaissance, nobody woke up and said, I'm in the Renaissance. I'm going to go compose music like this and paint like this because it's the Renaissance. Now we look back and we call it the Renaissance. But back then it was just Tuesday and they painted and they wrote music and they went to work. And he said the same thing is happening right now. And he challenged me. He said, is there a time in Jewish history when you would rather be alive than at this moment? And I think it would be very hard to find a singular moment when we would rather be alive in the scope of Jewish history. And one reason he's very optimistic is because what he sees as the future of Jews in Israel. He said that by the year 2100, which is less than 80 years away, 80% of the world's Jewish population will live in Israel. 20 million Jews, and 4 million Jews will be scattered throughout the world in different diaspora communities. And that, he said, is ultimately the reason why you need to care about Israel. Even if you don't care about Middle East politics or Israel or the Israeli government, if you care about Judaism, and by virtue of the fact that you're here tonight, you care about Judaism and the Jewish people, you need to care about Israel. Because whether we like it or not, Israel is the stage where much of the future of Jewish history is going to play out. So my hope for you, I'm just going to disagree with one thing the rabbi said. He said that hopefully this weekend with my visit, I'll bring you a little more clarity. I actually hope to confuse you a little bit more. And I know that sounds strange for a scholar in residence, but Israel is confusing. And one thing I want to do is show you that Israel is more complicated than we think. I want you to leave with just as many questions as answers after my weekend with you. Tomorrow, during services, I'll be giving a short talk from the Bima that I will expand on at our luncheon afterwards. And the theme for that is going to be Tohar HaNeshek, purity of arms. Every Western military has a code of ethics, but Israel's is different from every other in the world because of two things. There are two reasons that make it different. And during our text study, I'm actually going to give you the text of the purity of arms. And we're going to read it together and pull out some of the words that really inform what makes this code of ethics different. And we're going to look at examples from rabbinic writings and the Torah and other Bible stories that helped generate this code of ethics, and talk about soldiers who defied military orders in order to protect this code. Then tomorrow night, we are going to laugh, because all comedy, what does Woody Allen say? That comedy is just tragedy plus time. But I'll add this: in Israel, it's never too soon. You can laugh about something immediately. So on that, using that ethos, we're going to begin laughing tomorrow night, because there's still a lot of absurdity that comes out of life in Israel, visits to Israel, the Israel that we know and love. I really want to say that I'm honored to be here with you. I love the fact that I can be the guy who maybe brings a little bit of clarity, but also confusion to your own Israel narrative. I look forward to spending this weekend with you. I'll be here the whole time. You can ask me questions personally as well. Shabbat Shalom.
Joel, thank you so much for that. And it's a terrific book, and Joel brought copies of it. They're available throughout the weekend. You can just give us your name and we'll bill you later. You can pay for them, whatever you want to do. We'll figure it out. But don't leave without the book. Get the book. We're going to continue page 586 and rise for Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומשה ויקרו בשמיים עמו, ושכינתו זו בגובהי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפסולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום ושבות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא אלוהים, בשמיים ממעל, והארץ מתחת, אין עוד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. Thank you. As we turn to Kadisha Tome, the Mourner's Kaddish, on page 598, our thoughts turn to loved ones who are not here with us. Before we recite Kaddish together, a poem from our siddur, page 594. It is a fearful thing to love what death can touch, a fearful thing to love, hope, dream, to be and oh, to lose. A thing for fools this, and a holy thing to love. For your life has lived in me, your laugh once lifted me, your word was a gift to me. To remember this brings a painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a holy thing to love, what death has touched. On this Shabbat, we recall those who died during this past week or these past 30 days, whose families are in the midst of Shiva and Shloshim. As I read the name of your loved one, if you could rise, please, here or at home as you're joining us online, so that we might comfort you in our midst. Jay Denbo, Joan Fader, Robert James Jones, Sherry Klein, Eric Schneider, and those for whom the Yortzeit, the anniversary of the death of your loved one on this Shabbat, if you too could rise as I read their name. Sylvia Sora Arcus, Arlene Billenkoff, Nathan Blumen, Max Boberoff, Margaret Breslov, Max Brooks, Marion Cassier, Stephen Chernin, Bella Coblin, Paula Cohen, Lori Cooper, Elsie Easton, Leonard Ellen, Sylvia Finkelman, Alan Glanz, Deborah Goslin, Murray Grafstein, Walter Groh, Ruth Hendon, Ann Henriquez, Aggie Heinkmeyer, Alex Jackson, Rachel Jacobson, Vera Johnson, Chaim Cabazo, Howard Kaplan, Clara Lacko, Margit Laszlo, Bill Levitt, David Morton, Toby Moyles, Renee Nadell, Ben Posner, Isidore Prinzmetal, Nancy Prinzmetal, Lila Sachs, Shirley Seidman, Aaron Spevak, Sarah Stern, Bernard Tessler, Esther Vernon, Michael Weinsenker, Elizabeth Duncan Zaks. There are others who have come to say Kaddish, to remember loved ones. If you could rise, call out their name in the midst of our congregation as well. David? Looking around our congregation, seeing those that have stood in mourning, we don't want them to stand alone, so we'll rise now, standing by their side, providing hopefully the comfort of our presence as we join together in Kaddish Yatom, page 598. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, B'yolma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei l'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'yimaru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olam me'omaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damin ron be'oma v'yimaru amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimaru amen. Osei shalom b'romav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael, Amen. May the source of peace and peace to all who mourn comfort the read among us, and we say together, Amen. We'll conclude our service with Kiddush and Motzi, and then a closing song, and then join us, please, in our social hall for our oneg and an opportunity to be with Joel. We remain standing for Kiddush. Louis, you want to do Kiddush? Yeah, sure. Why not? It's here and that's there.
ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר יום השישי, ויחולו השמיים מהארץ וכל צבאם, ויחל אלוהים ביום השביעי מלאכתו אשר עשה, וישפוט ביום השביעי מכל מלאכתו אשר עשה, ויברך אלוהים את יום השביעי ויקדש אותו, כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו אשר ברא אלוהים לעשות. צריך ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'hava uvratzon hinchilanu zidkaron lema'aseh v'reishit tehiyon techiyal mikrahe kodesh zecher letziat Mitzrayim kivanu v'acharta Ve'otanu kidashta mikol hamim ve'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uveratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. L'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Thank you.
Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimroma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru amen.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.